Hey everyone, do you struggle with self silencing? Do you struggle with self silencing? Now, let me describe what that is before I bring our guests on. Self silencing is when you don't speak up for what you need, you don't speak up to set limits with people who are disrespecting you, or you don't give your opinion. Like, say someone's like, "Well, what do you wanna do?" You don't give your opinion, and the reason for this is a term, so it's not a description of a way you behave because there's a lot of times, we'll talk about that we self-silence when we should self-silence or when we decide consciously that's better for everybody involved, including ourselves, to self-silence. So there's sometimes that we silence ourselves. I'm using it as a descriptor now. Sometimes we silence ourselves when we are wanting to take the higher road, when we know it's not worth it, it's not worth our energy to use on that. And so that is a completely different thing that we're talking about tonight. What we're talking about is the term self-silencing. And it goes along with self-sabotage, it goes along with self-deprioritization. Um, it's really That's the best way to describe it, is deprioritization, right? So it's deprioritizing the self and prioritizing other people, other situations, and sometimes consciously that's okay because priorities change in the moment. There's always a different priority depending on the context of the moment. And sometimes we silence ourselves because it's safer to do so. Sometimes we think it's safer because we're worried, and sometimes it's actually safer. And sometimes those overlap like a Venn diagram. Sometimes we're afraid, and it is safer to self silence. But what we're going to talk about with our guests is sometimes when we self silence, when we don't need to, or maybe can speak up about what we need, can set limits with somebody, or we can express our opinion or what we want to do in context where it's safe to do so. Sometimes people silence themselves. They try to make themselves really small, and this suggests that they don't feel very worthy. So, self silencing in those kind of contexts when you don't need to, when it's not safe to do so, but your anxiety tells you that it's safe to do it this way, or your self-worth tells you don't bother anybody, or don't do this because you might upset somebody, then then self-silencing is not for you. It's not for your highest good. It's not for your highest relationships. Those relationships that you feel like you have to self-silence in to have safety are not relationships for your highest good. So we're going to bring on Adrienne first. And Adrienne is our first guest here, and she's going to talk a little bit about it. When I described what self silencing is, she raised her hand and said, "This is like me, and I want to hear a little bit more about it." So bring on Adrienne, and let's hear a little bit about her story. Hi, Adrienne.
Hi, how are you?
Oh, good. You sound very loud and good,
Oh,
very
good.
clear.
Thank you.
So tell us a little
Yes.
bit about your reaction when when you heard me describe self-silencing.
Well, just even right now,
Mhm.
I'm already feeling, that this wasn't right to speak up, right? So I guess I feel like right there is self silencing. It's that wavering between should I or shouldn't I? Is it the right thing? Is it not? Um, but yeah, I guess I always, when you did say the description, it really rang a bell and made me think that that was definitely me.
Yeah.
Um,
Wow,
almost
that's really interesting. So this is an incredible step for you to even speak up because you're so used to
Yeah,
self-silencing. I really appreciate you being here.
thank you. It's one thing to be behind the scenes and type something because then you almost feel shielded, uh, to then come out and actually have to speak about it.
Yeah, and you got a little guy speaking in the background there.
Yep,
I
yep.
hear a wolf. A woof. Well, another woof. Who's your little partner over there?
He is older Chihuahua Jack Russell, 17 years old. Hopefully
Oh, that's
he's
amazing.
thank you. is not there anymore to my knowledge. So, yeah. So that's good.
Okay, so tell us about give us some examples of when you notice that you're self-silencing after you heard this term.
One thing that I do know is I do find often that my spouse will say things such as, I need to put the mask on first,
Mhm.
right? It
Mhm.
is, I mean, you do hear that term often. Such as an airplane, you need to put it on yourself first before you would put it on your children. To me, that's foreign because I immediately, I would rather do for my children, do for somebody else than for myself.
Mhm.
So
How
that's
old are your
something.
how old are your children?
They are 16, 23, and 25. Oops, 26, excuse me.
Okay. Yeah, so they're a bit older. So you feel like I'd rather do for my children. So in terms of prioritizing, and most people could understand that. You don't even have to be a parent to understand that young people should be prioritized in general, right? So in general, of course, that's the priorities in your life. But you're not just talking about in general, you're talking about specifics, even specifics when maybe they don't need to be the priority. Is that like what kind of examples
Yes.
is your husband saying that about?
Um, okay, even most recently, where let's say one of the animals, right? One of my other fur babies, right? Needs to eat. They have specific routines. If they're in the kitchen, on the mat or whatever, it'll be okay, so and so, it's time for them to eat. And where myself, I would immediately jump up and go do that, right? It's just a no-brainer. Of course, why wouldn't I? But I noticed that, others, mainly everybody else in my house, would say, okay, I'll be right there. Or, and at times my husband has said, okay, I'm putting the mask on me first, and he'll get himself something to eat or whatever. To me, that's such a foreign concept. To me, it's like you can wait, they're here, they need it first. So,
That need, I think that might be where there is something they need it first. And there's
yes.
sometimes probably where they do need you first, right? So if somebody was bleeding or
Yep.
somebody if there was some kind of urgency or someone was in danger, the word need has a different connotation than if two people are hungry and they need it first, right? That no
Yep.
one's gonna die in 5 minutes of not eating, right? So the word need is interesting how we use this word need, and that puts all kind of pressure on us that makes us make choices, but the word is not used, you know what I mean? Like, we're not using the
Yeah.
word need in actual, like, literal terms of the word need.
I guess maybe need is more they need it before I would need it.
Well, maybe consciously, that could be right sometimes,
Right.
correct? Like, um, you delaying yourself 2 minutes to get them food doesn't even sound like that big of a deal. Like, in the whole context of life, could you delay your food to get the dog's food? Yes. Is it teaching the dog that they're not the alpha? Maybe. I mean, it depends on what you're thinking about, dog training. That's not the topic necessarily of this video, but
Right.
sometimes people say eat first and then feed the dogs, and then they kind of know who's the boss in the house. And they're going to be okay in those 5 minutes that you're eating or 10 minutes that you're eating, and they eat after, like if that's the routine in your house, they learn it, it's fine. They're fine. But there's something else at play here. I feel like that's why you're giving me this example is that in your mind, it's like they need it before me, but you're using the word need, so it's definitive and a truth, and there's no flexibility there, right? So if you said something like, actually, it's easier if I just do that, and then I don't have to worry about it, and I could really relax when I eat, and I could really enjoy my dinner more. That's a whole different thing to say than to be like, they need it before I need it. Do you know what I mean?
Yes. Yes.
what is that saying to you when
Um,
you hear that?
I hear what you're saying, but it's one thing when you, or, especially myself, when it's something I've always lived by. And part of it, if I had to, you know, self-diagnose, or somebody would say, well, why do you think, you would want to put their needs or your children's needs or whatever, right, prior to your own? I, I, the only thing I could think of is that, growing up, or, whatever, I know that when I have needed things, or whether, being little, it's always been a waiting game, and then there's nobody to rely on.
Mm,
And that isn't something how I want my children or my fur babies, people that are, who can't help themselves, who can't do it for themselves, or, that's why they come to me, so I can do it.
okay.
So,
So, when you were younger, you didn't have somebody to take care of you or get you the things that you needed. So, a lot of times you had to go without, you're saying, or there
well,
was really no
I
one to make
did,
sure.
but I feel like it's, when people say urgency, I don't mean drop everything to go do it right this very second.
Yeah.
And yes, I did, grow up with a split family, and but I would wait if I needed something. I wouldn't ask right away, because I felt as if I'm going to burden somebody. I
Okay.
want to be
So
here.
when you needed something when you were younger, you didn't ask for it, you're saying?
It was definitely delayed. It was
Okay, and,
definitely
like, you
a
thought about it a long time,
oh
you
yeah.
knew you wanted to ask, you had a
Yep.
you kept delaying, delaying, delaying because you thought, "I don't wanna burden anybody,
Yes.
let me look for a good time, let me read them and see if they're in a good mood, or
Yes. Let me
if
see
they
how long I
have
can go without it.
overflow." Right, "Let me see how long I could go." And what was the mechanism like? What was the context of those relationships that made you worry that you were a burden on them? Was there something that or was that
Um,
came from you, you think, or did it come from the context of the relationship? I
the context of the relationships, um, I it could have been stemmed from very, very early on. Like I said, parents were divorced, at very young age. So I never really had that. And that's irrelevant. Never had the white picket fence, the family is married, because that's irrelevant. But I guess I never had that
I don't know if it's
stability.
relevant. Is it irrelevant?
I don't know. I guess I guess there's also a little stigma when people say, "Oh, I grew up in a broken home." That doesn't mean that things were bad, right? And
Yes, every family is completely different.
right, right.
Th
So
There's a divorce or,
right,
there's sometimes it's still very comfortable and secure,
yeah,
and sometimes it's not. So there's a whole variety of those kind of families and other families too. Families who parents
right,
don't get divorced but have a lot of conflict and or other problems. So yeah, all families are so totally different. But do you feel like did you have like worry about them or guilt about them that they weren't okay or that
uh mostly, or actually I should say all worry, because was never I was split, right? So it was constantly at this one or that one, or you know different, this grandparents, that grandparents, that mom, that dad, whatever. So to me it was, you had to be good, and don't be a pest or a burden where you are, because them to want you back, right? And
Mm.
so,
So
even,
so
just,
you
I never
want
wanted to
them
be a
to want
pest or a burden.
okay, I heard you just say you want them to want you back.
Yes.
'Cause you visited different grandparents, you went to back and forth with your parents, and you wanted when you were there for them to have a pleasant time with you and not be burdened by you, so they wanted to have you again.
Correct. Yep.
What do
That's,
you
I mean,
think that means that you thought back then that you had to
well, displacement. I mean, obviously, I mean, if you look and you say, okay, what is your address? Right. I mean, now as a parent, right? And also divorced. So my children went through divorce. It was very important for me to teach them that wherever they were was their home.
Mm,
Where for myself, I mean, that's your child. You don't you don't think like a parent does. So, and I know that obviously my thought process when I was younger wasn't rational, and it was, I mean, it was just I wanted to be good. I wanted to want them want me back, especially when they both moved on and had more kids and families, and they all stayed, right, in their permanent residencies, and I was the wanderer, right? The
Were you the only child? Like, you didn't
Yes,
have siblings, whole siblings? Okay.
yes.
So, yeah. Yeah. Did you make this connection before or the last couple days when we started talking about doing the show?
I never knew I didn't know that term, what you said, self
Yeah.
silencing. I didn't know that was something. I just thought it was what
Terms
I
are just terms. It doesn't mean
yeah.
they're something. It's,
Yeah, but
you know,
I guess I would just look, and if I had to put a definition, it would just be, um, you know, you know, selfless, right? Just just kind of doing what I can to make other people happy.
yeah. And is is that, like, do you feel like if somebody if you feel like somebody do you feel like somebody just is either selfish or selfless? Like that there's only two ways to be?
It's definitely not black and white. I get that, but
Awesome.
I feel that you do have a tendency to be more one than the other, unless you are shown, unless it's brought up and kind of, which is, I guess, why I'm kind of here, right? It's kind of, is this normal? Is this, are there other,
Well, it really depends. It really depends, and I was thinking this earlier when we were speaking, just, a couple minutes ago during the show, but I was thinking, you really didn't describe a problem, and you said, "Well, I usually feed the fur babies first, and then I eat." If that's not a problem for you, if there's no negative consequences of that, who am I to call it a problem, or who is anybody to judge? We can't say that's healthy or unhealthy. If it's not a problem for you, questioning whether it's normal or not is the problem, not the behavior. But and that behavior probably is not, the biggest problem. But if you were to not speak up or set limits with somebody who's disrespecting you, or if you had some needs that weren't being met by somebody really significant in your life, it sounds like your husband is trying to get you to take care of yourself. So maybe it's not him, but if there was somebody in your life that disrespected you and you were worried about upsetting them and didn't speak, you could see how that would be a more of a problem.
yes, yep.
Yeah.
And now, I mean, stemming from, we were discussing
Yeah.
little, and where would something like this come from? When was your first thought of this? To even now, right? Now, at my age, it's the same thought process, but it's a very kind of similar scenarios. You said disrespectful, but how do you define disrespect? Because,
Well, I guess if somebody makes you feel small or someone who makes you feel devalued, um, or,
and I guess that's where I'm skewed, because to me, somebody who makes you feel small or devalued, that's that, I get that. But then when you say disrespected, I almost see that as more of oh, no one disrespects me kind of a scenario. But then when you say it as in makes you feel small, when you put those two things together, it's oh, that is a disrespect. It's a very eye opener, but I still live with that. I deal with that
do people
with those families.
but it's interesting. So, the context maybe made you feel small, did the people? And also, is there somebody in your life now who continues to make you feel small, or is it you just repeating those old stories to make sure you don't upset anybody else or still get asked back? You know what I mean?
I do.
Are you perpetuating it, or still because you wanna be involved with your kids or not
Yes.
be kicked out of your partnership or
Well, I guess like, from earlier saying that I wanted to be good to be able to stay, right?
Mhm.
And now I'm right back there too, where these same families, right, are still together with those same siblings and whatnot, and I'm still the piece that floats, right?
The older step sibling.
Yeah, yep. But I'm the only one, right?
Yeah.
And not, but I'm still dealing with that where I still, when I go, it's only me and my family that go. And I'm starting to realize that that is kind of disrespect, that they don't, there's no even ground.
Mm.
There's no, it's I put everything on my end, aside so that we can visit and
Do whatever
right.
they want, like,
Yep.
play by their rules.
Right, but it's not reciprocated, right? It's not. And being at this age and my children, is just kind of one of these things that we do it because it's expected. How do you know when self-silencing has put you in this situation, and how do you know, or even how to stop it so that you don't continue to self-silence?
Yeah. I think that, for somebody like you who's really sensitive and prioritizes their kids, I think it's honorable. I don't think that I don't wouldn't judge that in a second. But I think that you, if the rest of your family's hurting, sometimes it's easier. Like when you're so used to deprioritizing yourself or making yourself small, sometimes it's easier to see through the eyes of, is this hurting anyone else in my family that I would like to prioritize? Like sometimes you have to kind of go through that to then get to, I deserve it too, but what do your kids deserve? And I have another guest coming on, Adrienne. So we don't have much more time to go into this, but what I want to invite you to is to look at, especially leading up to the holidays, because when I hear you talking, I'm thinking there's celebrations and you're an outsider, but you go and blah 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 blah. And so you don't have to do any action or change anything or speak up or anything, but this might be a good time to think about, are they loving towards my kids and my family? Are they inclusive? Are they caring? Is there some mutualness of it? And maybe just take this year to observe a little bit about, and then ask yourself what you would say if you could. Maybe you would never say it. I don't know, but this is just a practice that I want to invite you to. And of course, I'm here if you need anything else and you want to talk further. I'm sure I could talk to you about this for hours. But if there's no problem, there's no problem. But this is where it sounds like there is some kind of not comfortable thing, is when you're invited to these celebrations. Am I catching you right?
Yes, yep, absolutely.
Okay. So don't, I'm not like, change your life after these 10 minutes of talking to me, but but at least I want to invite you in. Of course, I'm here for other things. I have a group, or you could work with me, or you could come on again if you want to talk further, and we could use the whole episode for you if you want, especially about this. But use this time, because I don't want you to like step so far out of your comfort zone that it's ridiculous, you'll never do it. But just spend some time observing, because that might be where it's important, is if your kids are cared about and your kids are mutually cared about, right?
Right, yep. And that makes sense because that's my priority to me. And
Yeah.
I'm okay. Yeah, I'm okay with sitting back and letting them go first. I mean, yeah, I'll put the mask on them, but
But you're part of the unit too, like your family
yeah,
is one. So what's good for them is good for you. Like I think that that's what I do, is like I teach empaths because they're sensitive, and that they're working in the world like you are, talking about you are. They're sensitive to other people, and then that makes them maybe make themselves smaller when they don't need to, because if it's for your highest good, it's for everybody's highest good, and that includes your kids, your husband, the family members, right? They might not like it initially. That doesn't mean it's not for their highest good. I'm not saying I want you to stand up for yourself and like tell them off or anything, but if you had to set some limits and they got mad or something, it still might be for their highest good. But if you knew that if you did something, if you spoke, whatever you ended up doing, and we're not ready, we're not even halfway there yet, but whatever you decide to do to stop the self silencing, if it's for your highest good, then it has to be for everyone else's highest good. And sometimes that's our only way to be able to choose those things because we wouldn't choose it for ourselves, and that's okay. Does that make sense?
Yeah, it does. It does.
Okay.
But it's different when somebody else says it. But yes,
Oh,
thank you so much.
you mean to me? Like it was good that I said it, you mean?
Yeah, yes.
Okay. Okay. Well, thank you so much for being on. I
Thank
really
you.
appreciate it. And
Yes.
we'll talk to you another time.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it.
Okay.
All right.
Bye, Adrienne.
Bye.
And next we're going to talk to Alenka. I knew it and then I said it wrong, but she's going to come on. So, Joe's going to bring Alenka on here. How's it going, everybody? I know we're gonna go along again. Oh, there's a couple chats in here, so let me just okay, we're good. Okay, just check. Hey, Alenka.
Hey, there we go.
Hello.
Turned everything on. We're good.
Oh,
Hi.
welcome. I am gonna unpin me so you got half the screen here. Hello.
Hi. How's you doing?
Good. We went over. Of course,
Don't
I'm
worry about it. I
we
was
talk.
sitting and working and doing stuff. I got things to do. We're good.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
thank you for being on and talking about self-silencing. Why don't you tell us a little bit about what made you raise your hand for this episode and this topic?
Yeah. I think for me, this last few years have been a series of a lot of growth. And one of the things I realized is that I grew up in a environment where it was easier to make myself small in whatever way that meant, more acceptable, more palatable, in order to fit in order to be accepted. And that worked really well for me in a lot of ways until it didn't. And in 2021, I went through really horrible burnout. And I think part of that was that like I didn't feel safe standing up for myself. I didn't feel comfortable standing up for myself. I didn't have the language to use to explain my needs and what was going on. And so, yeah, the last few years has been a wild journey of figuring out how to explain what's going on and how to share it in a way that people can understand and that they respect and um,
That is
that
a challenge. You
it's
could
hard.
bottle that and sell that because that's a challenge. People ask that all the time of me is like, how do I say it in a way that people understand? I'm like, well, you can't control other people. So that's
Yeah.
really difficult. It's like how to say it in a way that I guess keeps you the safest you can. Like literally not because of
Mhm.
anxiety. But yeah, so tell us what you learned.
Yeah, I think like so like one of the examples if we talk about family because a lot of us like that's the hardest thing. I think for me it was understanding how to explain it. And I will say that my background in work has made it that I've learned how to say things in a way that like um, is very soft and gentle. And sometimes it's too soft and gentle. So like, you know, sometimes
Mhm.
people don't get the point across, but I've just kind of learned how to massage the message, if you will, so that it doesn't come across as like it doesn't shut the person down that you're talking to, right? Because then it's
That's
not an
not
effective form of
easy.
no, it's hard. It's really hard to have that
And that
type
doesn't
of
always work
communication.
because you can't there's still people are sometimes loose cannons, aren't they?
Yeah, I mean, and that like you do your best, but I think when you come in with the intention, or at least this is what I try to do, with the intention of preserving and growing and deepening the relationship, like that is the goal. I just have learned that like there are certain things that I'm no longer willing to say or to allow others to say. I think someone told me, and I really liked it. One of the most powerful things you could do is to like say nothing and let them sit with what just came out of their mouth. And like just in that moment of no one saying anything, can that reflection, and then oftentimes they'll just start spiraling and talking and apologizing. And that like you didn't have to do anything. Like it's a very effective form.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, just like stunned, like a little bit plain stupid, like What?" You
Yeah.
know? And
Yeah.
it's very powerful. It could be really powerful, like having them be a witness of what they just said by your reaction of like, "That's weird."
Yeah.
Great example. When when you're learning to stand up for yourself, because because I think this is important for people to know when they're thinking about self-silencing. I mean, the
Yeah.
answer to self-silencing or to speak up is not always to defend yourself
No.
or to stand up for yourself, is it?
Yeah, it's not, I would say that like you have to read the room and you have to feel safe in the moment to do that because it isn't always. Like it could be your physical, it could be your emotional, it could be if you say something to your boss right now, things are going to blow up and not in a good way, you know? Like and so it's always
Mhm.
kind of getting a gauge. And I think the standing up for yourself or like the stopping this is like first of all just acknowledging that it is happening to you, right? Cuz like I grew
So it
up
starts
very
with you with yourself.
with myself.
So it
It's
starts with
yeah.
you with yourself saying, and there's some compassion piece to it, I would call it, is this acknowledgement that this happened. I feel like this, and that is a regular human response to what just happened.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It can be
Yeah.
something as small as like, "Oh my gosh, I'm really exhausted." And I will say that I do get really exhausted after stressful calls and meetings or interactions with
Mhm.
certain people, right? This is a response that I've started to recognize as a pattern. Um, and like taking a moment to take a deep breath or lying down or like listening to calming music for like 5-10 minutes for me has been like, and allowing myself permission to do that, and not feeling guilty about it.
Wow. Awesome.
It's wild compared to like just
Mhm.
push through, go through, have another cup of coffee, just keep doing it like that. And that's, I mean, that's what led to burnout for me,
Mhm.
and all sorts of things that I hope, no
So,
one else
so this just
experiences.
like allowing yourself to feel, allowing yourself to recover,
Mhm. Yeah,
this like
exactly.
care and compassion for yourself is really the first step in no longer being self-silencing. You haven't even spoke to anybody else yet.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
this piece is so I love that you brought it up because this piece is such an important piece is like our relationship with ourself is one of the biggest factors here. I mean,
Yeah.
sometimes, like you said, it's the context. Some people are dangerous and there's no point just
Yeah.
standing up for yourself to them. It's like get away and stay away.
Yeah.
But there's sometimes, but the everything else in other situations, it's about allowing ourselves to feel what we're feeling,
Mhm.
allowing ourselves to have our process, allowing that
Yeah.
rest or recovery time or this compassion time or some kind of self-care time. It's really beautiful. And then
Yeah.
sometimes you recover so much you don't have to say anything. But actually you did stand up for yourself because you were like, that I'm not taking that in.
I mean, every situation is different. I will say that like, so for example, there was a situation with a boss last year where I said what I felt comfortable saying in the moment, and then I spent the entire night like I wasn't able to sleep. I was crying. I was freaking out. And then I scheduled time with the superiors and like had the conversation, right? And so like it doesn't always happen in the moment. It doesn't always look as clean as I think we like to think it does. It can look really messy. It can look like a lot of different things, but I think just acknowledging whatever it is first, cuz I was the queen of should. Like, oh, I should do this or I should feel that way or like, and that doesn't, it invalidates what you're feeling, but the feelings were still
Yes.
there.
Yes. It's all negative self-judgment, right? So
Yeah.
it's invalidation on top of the invalidation that happened that caused you to be upset in the first place.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, and so the opposite of that invalidation, basically self-silencing is self-invalidation, right?
Yeah.
And and so when we want to value ourself, so the opposite of self-silencing is self-valuing,
Mhm, mhm.
which could look like a lot of things, like you
Yeah.
said. It could look like standing up and having that conversation if it
Mhm,
was
mhm.
deemed you were safe and you were calm and whatever, you weren't gonna blow up your life,
Yeah.
or put yourself in a dangerous situation. And sometimes, like I said, it's getting out of there
Yeah.
because it's not a safe situation. But it starts with valuing yourself, like laying down, listening to music, those things that you said, like accepting where you're at.
Yeah. And I think it can sometimes be really small. Like last Mother's Day, my mother was visiting. We went out with a friend and her kid, as like a little Mother's Day lunch. And then we were coming back and we were all going to hang out. And I got a crazy headache. And normally I would just push through and I would spend time with everyone. It was a really beautiful day. And I said, hey guys, like I'm lying down. I need to get rid of this headache and I'm not going to be great company if I stay awake and stay with you. The world didn't end, and it's just so wild because I grew up being like, oh, you need to be a good host, you need to take care of everyone around you, but like this Nobody was upset. They were all okay with it. And it was fine, you know? And I think for me, it's like acknowledging those small moments that like it can be a big thing and it can also be almost like a small negligible thing, but those build up. And so when I've gotten this experience, I was just talking with my therapist about it. Um, to experience the concept of neuroplasticity and how that's really changed how I think about things and how the thoughts, instead of like ignoring them and pushing them down, I acknowledge them. And when I can take care of how I'm feeling, I do. And if I can't do it right away, I'll do my best to do something about it later on. But really prioritizing that instead of everyone and everything around me has been a weird shift. It's in a very good way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was talking to the last guest about when it's for your highest good, it does end up to be the for the highest good of everybody else.
Yeah.
Have you found that now that you are honoring your highest good?
Yeah, I've noticed a big difference in terms of a lot of different relationships where it's like, hey, I'm going to do this. And if you're not okay with it, that's okay. But like that, you know, whatever that boundary, if it's a boundary or whatever that thing is. And it allows other people to have the freedom to do the same for themselves, which I think is so powerful. You
Yeah.
know, that
Mom.
allows them to take that nap and not force themselves to be, you know, or to like my family is very like we really like value the time we spend together, but like literally the I was just visiting them for Thanksgiving and I was talking to my dad on the couch one afternoon and I was falling asleep because I was so exhausted because I had pushed myself so hard, like I was, and like saying like, I'm sorry, I'm going to take an hour, like I this is like we can't even have a conversation because I'm not awake right now. Everyone was fine with it. Like, yeah, of course we would have preferred to spend time together, but I think in the past I would have pushed a lot harder or grabbed some caffeine or, you know, whatever it is, and
Yeah.
it's just
And so
shift.
when you took that hour and then came back,
Mhm.
this is what we're kind of talking about is that the quality of that time when you come back is improved because you were able to you recovered.
Yeah, you recovered. I think like in the past I would have been like on edge because
Yeah,
you
you
know
would
when you're
stayed up,
tired.
caffeine, whatever, pushed through, but it wouldn't have been as enjoyable as it could have been
No.
if you rested and then came back and really could be present.
Yeah, yeah, and I think that's it's a tough, like now I see it more obviously, but when you're in the middle of it, it's not. It just
Especially when you
isn't.
have a habit of doing it one way for a really long time and you think that's
Mhm.
what's best for everybody. You know it's not best for you maybe at some level, but you think it's what's best for everybody to stay, and then you realize, "If I took this time and came back, the quality of that time could be so much better and everybody
Yeah.
is happier, you know,
Yeah.
and I'm happier, and I'm not so small, and everybody's the same size," you know? Like, everybody matters and everybody's valued, and that's really where the transformation is. So I love your
Mhm.
examples. They're so relatable and perfect because I think when you describe yourself before, when you were burnout, that's only like 3 years ago you're talking about, and everyone in the world was burnout in 2021. But it was so overwhelming.
Yeah.
And then the transformation you did, this commitment you must have made to yourself and this healing journey is pretty special.
It's been a wild ride and not like if you had told me I would be in the place I am today, I would have thought you were crazy
You
3 years
probably had
ago.
some really great help.
I
We
have had some really great help. I've had some amazing people surrounding me, and yeah, and I've spent the dedicated effort trying to, you know,
Yes,
change my life.
yes,
Yeah,
and then your commitment to it, like you said, yes, excellent. Okay, Alenka, I really feel like that, your story inspired people that it is not that hard to do this, and it doesn't blow up your life to start setting limits, and ask for what you need.
yeah. It could be a
Sometimes you're
glass of
so
water
happy.
sometimes.
Say that again?
It could be a glass of water. You
Yeah,
know, like it really doesn't have to be a huge thing.
yeah.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah, and if you start doing that, especially with the small stuff, that's actually a really good point. If you start asking for the smaller things, people want to be helpful,
hmm,
right? People in relationships, they want to be needed as well. So if you are doing things for them and they feel like they could do things for you, they feel so wanted and needed. And I think
yeah,
humans want to feel wanted and needed. So if you are
mm,
self silencing out there, start small.
Yeah.
Ask for something like a glass of water, get it for other people too. Make it a mutual thing that you're asking for stuff, and notice people's faces. They're so happy to feel needed like that. That
Mhm.
might encourage you to keep going and keep asking for stuff you need. And those are relationships that are good mutual relationships
Yeah.
that you want to be in.
Yeah. That makes a huge difference.
Well, thanks so much. I'm just gonna we could say goodbye to you, Alenka, and thank you very much. And I will just sign off after you hang up here. You're
It's
founder of
still
say that
it's
again.
uploading on my side. Should I leave it
Oh,
open for a bit?
oh yeah, you could do it in the background. So thank you, Adrienne and Alenka. And I am so happy that you've joined us today. Please subscribe. I'm live every Monday at 8 p.m. If you're listening to this on a podcast, if you're on Apple, please give me a 5-star review that gets this out to other people, which is so needed. Come on over to YouTube. Follow me there so that you can see me live. You could join in the comments. And if you want to sign up to be a call in guest, I would love to have you on. I have a list of topics, and you could be like, this is me, and I need some help. And you get some live coaching right on. Sometimes I just have one guest. You get a whole half hour with me for free. So I look forward to seeing you every Monday at 8 p.m. right here. And I'm not queued up, everybody. So you're going to hear me talking while I cue up my outro. Okay. Ooh, there's an issue with my LinkedIn. Okay, I forgot to fix the LinkedIn. That's okay. Hello. Hey, Joe.